welcome back to the channel. Today, I wanted to look back on a game from my childhood. It's one of those games I stumbled upon back when PlayStation Magazine came with those PS1 demo discs that would have multiple upcoming titles. I came across this game Fighting Force from 1997. Fighting Force was released on Sony PS1, Nintendo 64, and PC. The game was developed by Core Design and published by Eidos Interactive. Fighting Force is a 3D style beat 'em up game that puts all the emphasis on fun and gameplay instead of story. And actually, to be honest, this game barely has a story at all, as the game has almost zero dialogue, and mostly just somewhat of an arcade style straightforward game. Players will control one of 4 different characters, all of which have their own moves and skill sets. Elena McKiLL is the smallest and quickest of the group, while Hawk Mason and Mace Daniels are your mid-sized, more well-rounded characters. While also the player can play as Ben Smasher Jackson, who is the biggest and strongest character, but he is far slower than the others. All 4 characters have various reasons for wanting to take out the game's main antagonist, Dr. Dex Zing, who is a criminal mastermind with an army at his command, who predicted the world would end in the year 2000. But after this isn't the case, he takes it into his own hands to attempt to destroy the world. And that's about all the story there is. I mean, really, that's it. No dialogue is delivered by any of the characters throughout the game. The player will fight through various stages, some of which will have a small boss fight at the end of it. These so-called bosses are just bigger, stronger versions of the game's common enemies, and there's not much to these boss fights other than fighting until the boss's life bar is depleted and moving on to a new location. It's believed that Fighting Force was originally supposed to be Streets of Rage, but Sega declined this and the game went forward with the under-production title of Fighting Force. And Fighting Force was much anticipated but met with mixed reviews. I personally never knew much or cared much for the story of this game, and I honestly just enjoyed the game based off the gameplay alone. The player, with whichever character they choose, will fight through urban and science fiction type environments, while battling oncoming waves of enemies. Players will fight using hand-to-hand combat mostly, which every character moves a little bit differently. But the player can also use a variety of weapons you'll find scattered around an environment, such as guns, knives, soda cans, and pretty much whatever you can get your hands on. Like I had mentioned, Core Design pitched the game to Sega as being the 4th installment in the Streets of Rage series. Core Design wanted to make a 3D style arcade Streets of Rage for Sega Saturn, but Sega passed on this as they had their own plans and direction for the Streets of Rage franchise. So Core Design made this a standalone, multi-platform title, and the game went forward into production as Fighting Force. The original PlayStation release received mostly mixed reviews. Critics and players alike overwhelmingly commented that the game had a satisfyingly large amount of interactive scenery to destroy or collect weapons from, but they all agreed that despite the transition to 3D, the gameplay was not meaningfully different from the 2D beat 'em up styles of earlier console generations. The game was summed up as being a basic 3D version of Capcom's classic series Final Fight, except here the characters and enemies lack personality of those in Capcom's Final Fight. Most who did praise the game, however, seemed to like the simplicity of Fighting Force and compared it to the likes of old school 2D side-scroller beat 'em ups. However, criticisms aside, the game did well enough to prompt the development of a sequel. And in 1999, Fighting Force 2 was announced for the Sony PlayStation and Sega Dreamcast. Unlike the original Fighting Force 2 had you play as the character Hawk Mason exclusively, and awarded a more stealth-like approach in gameplay. But maybe we'll discuss this in a future video at some point. If you're familiar with this channel, then this may come as a change in pace, as we mostly focus on horror games. But moving forward, I do want to start to branch out and cover different genres of gaming library. This channel is still in its infancy stages and has a lot of room to grow. However, I plan on still covering many retro survival horror games as always, while also branching out and switching it up from time to time. And I plan on covering more games from this era. As I grew up, playing mostly on the original Sony PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and Super Nintendo. and I really enjoy looking back on these games from this era. I love the nostalgia. So looking back at 1997's Fighting Force, a game made to be a fun 3D beat 'em up. It is exactly that. Not much in the way of deep storytelling or dialogue. This game was fun because it was simply fun. Choose a character and beat the shit out of everything that gets in your way. Not much to it, but growing up, this shit was fun to play, despite it being your simple arcade 3D fight game. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button down below, as it helps the channel a lot. Also, if you want to see more retro games videos, visit our channel and consider subscribing for more, just like this. This channel has plenty of room to grow, and if you like this kind of content, also consider sharing these videos so we can grow our audience in the future. But until next time, this has been McKiLL TV, Fighting Force, a retrospective.